A group of Massachusetts high school students are being accused of some shocking behavior. Investigators say 6 Lowell High School students allegedly exchanged racially charged texts after the election of a black student as senior class president. Our Catherine Sotnick joins us now live from Lowell with more on this. Catherine?
Well, Mike, those students are now suspended from Lowell High School. And as for that class president, he says he wants to move past all of this and he wants people to learn from it. Anye Nkimbeng is a newly elected high school senior class president at Lowell High School. But the 18-year-old says that excitement soon turned to sadness and fear when he learned other students were using racial slurs while talking about him in a group phone text conversation. One text said, "Rule out blacks," another insinuating he couldn't speak English. That wasn't even the brunt of it.
F Anye, F black people, saying they're going to lynch me.
NECN has learned 6 students at the school have now been suspended for the texts.
I was scared. At them, you don't hear lynching every day.
The city says school officials have met with Anye's parents and have worked things out, including a safety plan. But at first, Anye says he was not satisfied with the administration's response.
I just tried to avoid it. Really, the headmaster, he never talked to me. He never called me to the office to ask me how I felt.
We firmly believe that this is an aberrant behavior that happened just once. We can't explain why it would happen.
The city says the school is now looking to start the healing process. Anye's father also says he's not looking for punishment, but education.
I'm just thinking and praying that out of this incident, something positive can come.
My main concern now is focus on my education and because I'm the class president, I just want to make sure my class we have a good year and to make sure this doesn't repeat itself next year.
And the city manager says, according to the district attorney's office, that at this point, none of this rises to a criminal offense. Live in Lowell tonight, I'm Catherine Sotnick, NECN.
It was difficult. We all cried, we all laughed, and we're actually working on healing.
It is a difficult step, but Anye Nkimbeng's mother says a meeting Friday night with the parents of the students behind the text messages is helping to heal wounds.
There was apologies from everybody.
After Anye was voted senior class president this week, a racist text rant went viral.
I was shocked, hurt, but disappointed.
One included the N-word, another F black people. Rule out blacks, make Lowell High School great again, wrote another student. Even lynching was mentioned.
Out of all words, you say you're going to hang me because I won. I was surprised, shocked, and what if it happened?
We're still very worried, safety and stuff, but we know we're very confident that things will be fine.
The district has suspended 6 students, and Anye's parents are hopeful that discipline and open dialogue can help their son and his classmates move beyond a painful chapter in their senior year.
Forgiveness is, we don't hold anything in our hearts, but we just need to be able to learn from this and move forward.
And police have been investigating, but at this point they say they do not plan on filing any criminal charges. We're live in Lowell tonight. John Atwater, WCVB News Center 5.
6 o'clock tonight, 6 students are suspended after sending a racially charged group text. Now, a screen grab of that text ended up on social media and it has gone viral. The text was about the new class president at Lowell High School, a student who happens to be black. Fox 25's Robert Goulston talked to the young man and his family, still rattled by what was in that message.
The Lowell High School senior was supposed to be celebrating his big day. He had just won the election to become class president, but his victory was cut short when a group text started going around saying that he should be removed because of his skin color.
I'm disappointed and I was sad and heartbroken.
Anye Nkimbeng never imagined he'd be doing news conferences after winning his class president election. But after a group text with racial and hate comments surfaced, he found himself in front of the cameras.
F Anye, F on black people. Oh, he will never be a good president. He can't speak English.
The group text was sent out to 12 students. One message saying, he shouldn't be president, impeach him, imagine him doing your graduation speech. One response read, expletive black people. Another one read, rule out blacks, and hashtag make Lowell High School great again. School officials telling us today 6 of the students on the group text have been suspended because they responded to the original text. Anye's father says his heart sank because one of the messages said a student wanted to lynch his son.
When I heard that word lynched, I was numbed and cold and frozen because I know that word, what it means.
Anye's mother had to find out about the hateful messages from her son, not the school.
And you don't say a word to the parent of the victim. It really kills us.
I do want to personally apologize to the parents of Anye because they felt we could have communicated better when we first had some information, and I take full responsibility for that.
And Anye is already making race relations a priority as class president.
Like, my first thing is to start with the school, try to bring just our class all back together.
The Lowell police chief says he did go to the DA, but he says what happened did not rise to the criminal level. Now, the headmaster here at Lowell High School is also trying to connect those 6 students with Anye so they can sit down in one room and discuss what happened. In Lowell, Robert Goulston, Fox 25 News.
One text message also stated that a student wanted to lynch Anye. America has a long history with lynching, especially the lynching of people of color and particularly black people. Lynching is a threat to kill. To lynch, if you look that up in the dictionary, it means to put someone to death by hanging. This execution is carried out by mob action and without legal sanction. According to the Lowell Sun, Middlesex District Attorney Marion Ryan recognized the, quote, vile, offensive, and inappropriate language in the text messages, but she said that after she sat down with a team of lawyers in the Appeals Bureau, they found that they could not prove a threat.
Hello, I'm Wendy Blum, Executive Director of Lowell Telecommunications Corporation. I'm going to serve as tonight's moderator. The issues of fairness in the criminal justice system, racial stereotyping and differential treatment of black suspects by police, violence and the prevalence of guns in our communities, and police safety are very hot topics right now. I felt it would be beneficial for LTC to provide a forum to discuss these important topics so that viewers at home could gain some perspective on their own community. Our goal tonight is to gain an understanding of black and police perspectives so that making everyone feel safer is possible. We have a very impressive panel tonight. Thank you all for coming. On my left is Anye Nkimbeng. He's Cameroonian, Lowellian, and American. He's lived in Lowell for 30 years. In 1999, Fru became a member of the Lowell Police Community-Oriented Police Services. He's a founding member and former president of the African Cultural Association. He serves on several boards of directors, including LTC's. In 2015, his son was the target of racial slurs when he became the president of Lowell High School, which inspired community anti-racist actions. Captain Paul Laferriere has worked with the Lowell Police Department for 31 years. He's a practicing attorney, having graduated from Suffolk Law School in 1991, and he's a certified instructor in fair and impartial policing and procedural justice. Maritza Grooms, she's the teen coordinator at Girls Inc. of Greater Lowell. She was born in Lowell but raised in Boston. She came back to Lowell in 2012. She believes in community building and service, as well as providing platforms for young people to have a say in their community. She's a member of the Violence Prevention Coalition in Lowell and serves on various other boards and committees. Masada Jones is an artist and youth worker. She's the co-founder of Free Verse, an organization that teaches poetry and performance to youth in Lowell. She was named one of the 12 Magnificent Women of Lowell. Currently, Masada became the assistant director of the extended day program at Lowell Community Charter Public School. Before this, she served as the violence prevention coordinator at Teen Block of Lowell Community Health Center. She's one of the founders of Courageous Conversations, Why Talking About Race is Important. And Superintendent William Taylor was appointed to the Lowell Police Department in 1982. And in his 32-year career in the department has moved through the ranks from patrol officer to superintendent in 2013. In the 1990s, he was one of the founding members of the team that implemented community policing in Lowell. And thank you all so much for coming. I'm going to begin by just asking some questions so that you can each speak a little bit, and then we'll open it up for discussion. So Maritza, please tell us, what is the Black Lives Matter movement, and how does it express itself locally?
So it's my feeling that the Black Lives Matter movement is an affirmation of the value of Black lives. It is, historically speaking, that Black lives have been disproportionately killed, either through police brutality, disproportionately represented in mass incarceration, and extrajudicial killings. And our community has been plagued by poverty and lack of resources for pretty much since segregation happened. So Black Lives Matter to me is about unity and the love of Black lives, and it's calling for all of our communities to come together and just recognize that our lives matter too.
Okay, Captain Laferriere, how are police on the street trained to avoid racial stereotypes?
Well, lately what we've been doing is, because of the issues that have been happening, we have been training our officers at in-service every year in different ways of dealing with the public and in different ways of getting closer to the community. And actually, myself, I am a certified instructor in fair and impartial policing, as well as procedural justice, which are two of the topics that we teach. Now, we don't only teach Lowell police officers, we actually teach like 33 other communities also. So a lot of the communities that are in this Northeast area are getting the same training we are. And actually, Massachusetts, I believe it's mandated for this year that these two topics have to be talked about and trained by these officers. Just to give you an idea of exactly what they are, the fair and impartial policing looks at bias and looks at the fact that everyone is biased, no matter how you look at it. And if somebody tells you they're not, they're probably not telling you the truth. And so that even affects the police department. And what the object or the way that we look at it during the training is to make sure that officers are aware that there's bias out there and that bias comes into play every day of our jobs, but to also realize that our job is to put aside any bias that we may have and to actually treat everyone the same. And by doing that, you allow the people to, you work based on their actions. In other words, you don't do it based on the color of their skin or anything else in regards to who they are or where they live or anything. You should be basing your actions based on their actions as opposed to anything else. And the procedural justice part of it is that people want to be treated fairly by officers. They want to have a voice in what is going on, transpiring when they're dealing with police officers, and they want officers to be impartial as far as doing their job. And so what we want to try to do is to make sure that we do that so that people can feel comfortable and even if results of what happens is not to their liking, a lot of people are willing to accept it. A prime example would be, say, getting a speeding ticket. There are certain outcomes that can happen. You potentially can get a ticket. You potentially cannot get a ticket. You potentially, but it's the interaction with the officer that is the most important thing. And people would feel that if they're being treated fairly and you're being impartial about how you're doing your job, that they're willing to accept the consequences, in other words, if they get the ticket. But even if, say, you didn't give them a ticket, but you treated them unfairly, that encounter is going to give them a bad taste. And so what we're trying to do is to make all officers understand that they need to be able to do this fairly, impartially, give them a voice in what they do. And for the most part, people are going to understand that. And we want people to look at it as...
Well, Mr. Nkimbeng, what are your perceptions of the racial climate in the city? Do you think that some of the things that happened in the rest of the country that have been so upsetting because they've been captured on cameras and it's just so upsetting, do you think that could happen here?
Oh, definitely. Our city is really, it looks like a melting pot and it looks like the United Nations of cities. So it can happen here quickly too, because you have people from various backgrounds, from various cultures, and the perception and the way people look at things is quite different. So we come from different backgrounds and we look at things different. So there has to be an understanding and respect of people, not only by their looks, but try to see that we come from different cultures and we look at things differently. So I don't know if I fully understand your question.
Well, I guess I was asking specifically about your experience and your community's experience here in Lowell. Do they feel welcome or under threat? Or
I can only speak for myself. Sure. My experience are unique, and every other experience is different. I can speak for myself because I've been in Lowell for over 31 years, and I've had a very positive relationship with the police, and I've also been involved and have friends and families who are police and respect them, and I teach my sons to behave well and respect the police. And that said, it also resonates within the community that they are not they are misunderstood and also misperceived generally as criminals and on the wrong side of the law. I would also say that when you look at it, that can come from the perspective of ignorance, because I, as an immigrant, there are different ways that I can react to a police than even an African American. Mm-hmm. Because when you lump us together, it's very confusing. I, as a Cameroonian, Lowellian American, can only have a different experience than an African American, because my perception coming from where I come from of the police is quite different. You see, when the police stops you, you might want to run away from the police, but here you run to the police because they are there to help you. Yeah. So, and that going to the police and getting out of your car and going to the police can cause you a lot of problems, but that is from where the immigrants from Africa are coming from. So with regard to my personal experience, if I can say, I would say that the incident that happened to my son at Lowell High, I think I would be very thankful because the Lowell police actually showed a lot of support, because I would say that my family and my friends organized a peaceful march in Lowell, and that went peacefully because the Lowell police protected us and guided us through. And that those who came out in support of my son and my family were not only blacks. If you looked at them, majority were whites that I don't even know. So they feel that this city is a city for all of us, and is a city that's working towards making everyone from all shades of life, all background, live well and coexist with the police. And I think that what I see here, that is some preventive move that can avoid what you are just asking, is the fact that when I walk around town, I see police walking and then riding the bicycle and going to the neighborhoods and talking to the kids. That builds that relationship, unlike a police just driving by in the car. You look at them as people from the other side of the fence. So once we interact with the police, and it makes them part of us, but let's not forget that when you take the uniform out, these are members of our family. These are members of our communities. These are our friends. They feel the pains like us. And initiatives like Chief, who organizing town meetings, bringing the police and the community to talk on issues that affect us, and the police listening to the community, and then the community listening to the police. I mean, it offers a lot of therapeutic environment, because sometimes we just need to air our anger, we just need to air our frustration. But when we see the police amongst us listening to us, and even the chief himself there, we feel that there is that bridge that's building.
Well, Chief Taylor, you were just talking before we started this about some of the new initiatives that are going on and some of the education that the police are getting. Can you talk a little bit about that and its importance?
Sure. Thank you very much for hosting this forum. I think dialogues like this are extremely important, not only in Lowell, but across the country. And it's through discussions like this that we're going to try and work together to build trust between the various communities that the police department serves. We do. And shortly after the incident in Ferguson last year really exploded on the national scene, myself and members of my staff realized the implications for the profession, for police work. And you know, without question, things like that play out locally all across the country, and Lowell is just one of those communities. So we used it as an opportunity to put back together what had been previously called the Race Relations Advisory Council, and it had been allowed to kind of slip into just not being used very much, and I don't think it had gotten together for several years. We certainly thought it was appropriate to get that group back together and expand it and begin the dialogue in our community, because I may think things are great, but I only am one side of the equation. And so we wanted to hear from all the various components of the community. Lowell's an extremely diverse community, in addition to African American and African. Obviously, everybody knows we have a significant Cambodian and Southeast Asian members of the community, Hispanic, and increasingly even more diverse, we have Somali, Iraqi, and now Syrian residents of our community. So, you know, it's a very diverse place, and that's our strength, I think, personally, as a community, that diversity. So we got everybody back together, and we started these conversations. We've had, I think, 4 meetings. Most recently, about 3 weeks ago, we had the most recent one, which I think was probably the most well-attended. Probably, I think we counted about 80 people there. And it was a great discussion. And, you know, some of the comments and some of the discussions that we had were not pleasant. You know, there were people that have, I think, anger and some resentment, and that's good, but that's the appropriate place to get that out so that we can discuss it. And I think we certainly are going to continue those discussions as we go forward and try and expand them out. And you know, one of the things that came up at that meeting was to have more police officers there, and we're certainly going to do that. Just bring rank and file police officers into these discussions instead of just the people like myself and the command staff, so that they get to hear the community perspective. You know, it's very significant when you hear somebody in the community that is a person of color, and they explain to you that them or their family members have been had 15, 20 negative encounters with police officers over the course of the past several years. And then, you sit back from, like myself, and I say, geez, nobody in my family's had a negative encounter with a police officer in the last couple of years. And so you come to, it's through discussions like that and the back and forth, and I think everybody comes to a better understanding. So that's one aspect of it. As Paul said, we increasingly do training of all of our police officers on procedural justice, racial competency, implicit bias, things like that. And we're absolutely going to continue that. Just today, I will tell you that we sponsored a Smart Policing Initiative conference. Smart Policing is a federal government initiative that's funded and supported by the Bureau of Justice Assistance from the Justice Department at the national level. And we are a participant in that. And we're one of the examples across the country for a department our size of, organizations that do it well. And so they came to Lowell, and they brought many other police officials from around the country, and we had a 2-day conference talking about collaboration and building partnerships in the community. Many members from our very diverse community that we've worked with were there sitting on panels, and I think they did an extremely good job for the city, presenting how we do collaboration and how we build partnerships in this community. But one of the interesting things, there was a gentleman there, and I mentioned this earlier, that was the interim police chief in Ferguson, Missouri, Commander Andre Anderson from Glendale, Arizona. And he left Glendale on leave to go to Ferguson and be the interim chief for 5 months while they transitioned to a new full-time chief. And he explained some of the problems that they face, structural problems to the form of government that they have in those communities outside St. Louis. And then some of the challenges he faced and some of the things he did to get over that and try to start the collaborative effort between the police and the community. It was absolutely a fascinating discussion. He's a great person, he's a great man and a great police officer. I was fascinated by his remarks. So it's through things like that we get a better understanding.
Yeah. So, Ms. Abba-Jones, how do you think the teens feel about relationships with the police and their interactions?
Just from what I've seen, I've never really seen a police officer approach a situation where they're ready to de-escalate. It's always this heightened sense of authority where I'm like, I don't want to listen to that. And also, where I've had them, they first began, reprimanding the young person, then they start, when we as youth advocates and youth workers want to protect our young people, they've, also, got in an argument or, reprimanding staff as well. But it's always this heightened, even on the street, even if I'm at my aunt's house or, anywhere, it's always just very combative. I've never seen them de-escalate a situation, You know, so I can only imagine like what young people feel like regularly, because that's hard, you know, even as an adult, where I feel belittled, like, oh wow, so this is yet another condescending conversation with, you know, an adult authority figure, you know, where also I'm an adult, you know.
Yeah. Well, so the training is there, the will is there at the top, but it's not coming through necessarily.
I haven't seen it yet. I'm interested, like, how long has this process been happening? When has this training started? Just because I haven't, and I can only speak from my personal experience now, what I'm hearing, but I just haven't seen it.
Drew, do you have anything that you can see needs to be changed?
Well, but as a resident in Lowell within the community, I think it will be very important. Personally, I feel that 99.9% of the police are doing a wonderful job. But the community want to see the accountability of that 0.1% that do that bad job, that put the lives of the community and the lives of the 99.9% of the police force and the community at risk. Because it's that 0.1% that if they don't do something right or they maltreat someone, then the 99.9% who do a good job and the community will suffer. So I think at this point, as a community person, watching what is going on, I don't think we've really had an answer that how can that 0.1% be held accountable by their action, because it is their action that generates all the trouble that goes around.
Do you have anything?
Yes. I would say that the solution is to treat them, if you're breaking the rules, if you're breaking the law, then you're a criminal. I don't care what your position is. If the policy is don't chokehold a man, then you don't chokehold that man. And if you do, then you be held accountable the same way that criminals in our communities are held accountable for their actions. I think it's a very simple solution. I think the harder part is dismantling institutionalized racism and the systemic oppression that has been a part of this country since its founding. And I really think that more education needs to be done all around, all across the board with everybody, especially those who are working with young people, as Masada said, because if you can't talk about these issues, if you're uncomfortable talking about these issues, or you have no information, if you're not informed about these issues, then how are you going to then connect with those young people of color? How are you going to make accommodations for those people who are going through these other struggles that you may not even understand? I have seen people who work with youth treat young people of color way differently than they would treat a child who is not of color, who might do the same kind of infraction. And I've seen that happen because they are expecting it of that child of color. Children of color are often treated, especially in the school system, at another disproportionate rate, with suspensions, school hearings, and expulsions. And what happens when you drop out of school, or when you don't have education, then you might turn to a life of crime. That's what happens with lack of resources. So I think the more education that we do for ourselves and for each other, for our communities, especially if you're going to be working in human services, you need to know about human history. You need to have that education. You need to have that background. Then maybe we could get to a point where we can get comfortable with the uncomfortable and have those conversations, like the community dialogue that we had the other day. Totally uncomfortable topic. However, a lot of people felt heard. A lot of people got their points across, and we definitely want to have those more. And I think that's really important, that we're all agreeing that we need to do that, but it needs to happen on every level from the top down. It's extremely important to educate ourselves. And I think the more information that we have, the more power that we have. And I think that if we understand each other's experiences, if we just talk to a person of color and say, so what is your experience like? And be comfortable with the acknowledgement that maybe it's going to be different from yours.
But I beg to differ, because I think the discussion here is about the community and with the police. What I have brought forth is that 0.1% of the police whom we are sitting and watching, and people have had these experiences. And some have even brought up, people have seen it, and then they have seen that it is carte blanche, that nothing is done. So if there is no accountability, that even within the community, that we can actually channel our grievances and point out some of these things, and these people are held accountable. And if they're not held accountable, we wait until something happens. Then people vent their frustration because, you see, they say that I would say that if I bring it up, nothing will happen. And it is that 0.1%. And that 0.1% is not just hurting the community, you are hurting the men in blue who are protecting us, who have families to go home. And then we are sitting and watching. How is this 1% accountable? Because I think if we have that solution, what people really feel the pain is that someone does something and goes away with it. And we know that it is that 1% that has generated and be the cause of all this anger.
What is the accountability?
Well, we certainly investigate every complaint, every single complaint that we get, anonymous, video, phone calls, whatever we get, we investigate every complaint thoroughly and make a determination whether the officer acted appropriately or not. One thing I will say is in today's day and age, with instantaneous communications and social media, I think that has changed the dynamic tremendously, right? Because if you look at what happened in Dallas where those 12 police officers were shot, you will see that in that particular situation, by everything I know professionally, it looked like the Dallas Police Department was doing an exemplary job, right? They had, over the past 20 years, significantly reached out to the community. Their community policing, their collaboration efforts were tremendous. They were doing a great job. They even, coincidentally had a chief that a remarkable man from everything that I know, and he happens to be a person of color. But it didn't matter because in today's day and age with social media, instantaneous communications, something that happened in communities hundreds and maybe 1,000 miles away impacted Dallas, right? Because the individual used the Dallas as the venue, as the setting to, take retribution against what he perceived to be an unfair justice system. So we're kind of all in this boat together.
Yeah, I understand that, but there have been, for example, Timothy McVeigh, horrible murderer, white man, maybe even a white supremacist, I don't know, killed many, many people. But we don't say, well, the white community is out to get whoever he was out to get, I don't know, So I think it's important that people really think about setting up a dichotomy between Black Lives Matter and police safety. They're not, it's not a zero-sum game.
No, of course not.
Yeah.
But the point being, though, that I go back to this is that with the social media and the different communications that are available now, something that can happen well outside the community can impact your community. And I think that's the point. So I think we're doing a reasonably good job in here in Lowell and the city with our collaboration efforts in our police department. We can always do better. There's always going to be issues that we need to improve upon. But things that happen in other parts of the country certainly can have potentially significant consequences here, like they did in Dallas.
Sure, yeah.
And speaking of that, so earlier you were talking about how a lot more officers are going into work with more fear. So that's something, like I said earlier, you signed up for, you put that suit on, you go and you do your job. I would like to challenge this notion and say, how do you think the Black community has felt when decades and decades and decades of historical violence has happened to us? Don't you think there might be a little bit of fear and people are cracking under the pressure there? And I'm not saying, and definitely I feel like the Dallas cops that were laid to rest, I feel like that was an incredible tragedy. And I don't think that in any way was related to the Black Lives Matter movement. I feel like there are going to be extremists in any situation and that are going to use whatever positive thing you're trying to do as their source of angst or whatever. And I think this person also even said, like, I'm not really, I think they had some other issues. But I don't think those two things are connected. I don't think it's fair to say, you know, there's a heightened sense of fear with the police officers because of that, but wouldn't there also be a heightened sense of fear because of social media, because of the technological age? This is how, it's not just isolated incidents, and these things have not been, these are not new things. What's new is the cameras. What's new is that it's being filmed. And I'm sure that there are plenty of people in our communities, our parents, their grandparents, who can say, this is not new. This is something that's been going on. The only thing now is that we can connect the dots and see the patterns across the nation. And I think that's what's happening, is that people are now saying, whoa, this is not just in my community. This is happening everywhere. And I'm not, like I said, I do not condone the killing of anybody. I don't condone violence in any kind of way. And I think that's why the Black Lives Matter movement is trying to show that it is a peaceful movement with over 1,000 protests. And, you know, people want to frame it in this way that there are riots and things like that. But if there were riots, I'm sure that the media would show that. I mean, the media shows everything. So there's always going to be a place where we want to demonize something that is happening that is good. But to go back to this 0.1%, like I said, I don't think that all cops are bad. Absolutely not. I have a lot of respect for what you do. My father is a firefighter. I'm sure that he had fear every time he ran into a burning building, but he did his job and he did it well. And I think that that's what matters. Also, clean slate policy. I have that with my children. If they yell and scream in my face today, I cannot go back to them tomorrow with this sense of, all right, you were mean to me yesterday, so I'm going to treat you differently, right? That's not the case. Maybe there's been a history of crime in the Black community, but there's been a history of crime in every community. Every community of any race commits crime. But we are the perceived threat. We are the people who are treated differently. And that is very evident in cases like Dylan Noble, who shot up a church of peaceful people who were just going there to praise God. And he was given what? A bulletproof vest and Burger King. He was de-escalated very quickly. The motorcyclists who were in a shootout, there were a bunch of them. They were all de-escalated very calmly, not violently. And this is what we see time and again. So how is there not going to be fear in the Black community? It's not our job to not be afraid. It's kind of your job to do that.
Well, I will say this. I certainly have appreciation for the fear in the Black community. I absolutely believe that, and I'm absolutely categorically understand that. I've heard enough discussion from people who have been able to articulately explain to me exactly what you're talking about. So I do believe there's a lot of fear, and I think it's justified. I really do. But rest assured, there is fear in the police community right now. There absolutely is. I talk to the officers, and you know, and again, go back to one thing. They may have signed up to be the protectors of our democracy, but I don't think anybody envisioned that they were going to be subjected to what happened in Dallas. I mean, that's an extraordinary circumstances. Fortunately, it happens, you know, essentially very frequently.
But are they afraid of white men? Because about 70% of police officers have been killed by white men this year. So are they afraid of white men in the same way that they're afraid of Black men?
Well, I didn't put a race associated with that. I think what they're afraid of is being shot like that. I think that particular behavior has caused a lot of fear in the police community. Right?
That was one of the very few that have been publicized, is what my point is.
Well, no, I think we certainly get the updates on a weekly basis about the number of police officers that have been killed in the line of duty. So, you know, I do not want you to try and diminish the fear, because it is there. I talk to the police officers. They are fearful. And the other thing is their families are fearful, just like people in the Black community are fearful for their family members, right? Well, also the police officers, they have the same kind of family situation, and they, you know, get fear expressed to them. So I think there's fear on both sides of the issue here, and I think it's through understanding that, right, in the dialogue exactly like this, that we both come to the same understanding that, you know, we need to understand that fear on both sides and get around these issues.
How much
do guns play in this? It seems like everybody wants a gun these days. Is there more gun violence now than there used to be, or?
Yes, the answer is yes. I think so.
Well, there are more guns on the street.
Oh,
Sure.
yeah.
I want to say that first, like, for Lowell, I know that, is there something, first do you talk about what's happening with police brutality with your officers? I wonder if that's a conversation that you have, because like obviously this is a great forum for us to discuss this, but I wonder, is this a conversation that you have openly with them as well to kind of also explain what's happening in the Black and brown communities? Like, this isn't just the Black like issue as well, and we haven't mentioned women and children, which are also affected. Say her name, Corinne Gaines, who recently is in the media as well.
Her son in the hospital.
Yeah, and her son is in the hospital. But I just want to know if this is like, it's a great that we're having this conversation, but I do think that it's one thing to take out in the community. I think that in all of our own communities as well with our families, we need to be having these conversations within the police department. This conversation needs to be had. Like, especially if you care about, like, I care deeply about Lowell. I am born and raised here. I'm sure I tell people come visit all the time. But I still think that these conversations need to happen because largely in so many of the institutions in Lowell, the leader of that institution is a white person. And like, even like, and that's still very problematic given that we are this melting pot. Like, just given that we are this melting pot and we write about these magnificent things in our grants, which are very true, but at the same time, it's not as mingled as I would like to see it. And I think that these conversations continually need to happen. We need to talk about race and like, how does that feel for you? Have you thought about that? And like, one of the questions we ask in our Courageous Conversation is like, what was your first encounter like when you met someone who didn't look like you? Like, what do you remember that as like a young person? And like, try to just think about the different instances in which you had to deal with somebody that looked different than you. What was that like for you? Because I don't think that we talk about this enough. We don't talk about women and children that are affected as well. It's not, and the Latino community, like, this is not just a Black thing. It's a lot deeper.
We don't have too much more time, but I wondered if you could speak to whether the rank and file police, I know it's an integrated police force, is there a pretty good percentage of non-white police officers?
Yeah, we're very diverse. We have several Black officers. We have Cambodian officers. We have quite a few female officers and that. But what I wanted to get into is, and you kind of brought it up, was that we do need this open dialogue amongst everybody, but we need to also bring everybody to the table too. It's not just the Black community and the police officers. It's everybody. And actually, you brought it up at some point, and you did too, as far as the teachers, and as far as other people that we deal with and everything. And I've read articles about even your own doctors treat people differently, of different colors and races and that than they do of other people. And it's a big issue that is not just us and you guys. It's everybody. And until we can get everyone together to make everybody aware that this is going on, they don't see that they're doing it. Right. This is their own. This is what they call that implicit bias, that they don't even realize it because they don't. It just happens. Yeah. And until they understand that they're like that these things happen, the change is going to be slow coming.
I think you said that very well, and it really kind of ties up what we're trying to do here, is talk about race, talk about your own experience with race, and I hope that maybe we can have more of these conversations here at LTC. I know you're doing it with your Courageous Dialogues, and you're doing it with your community meetings, and let's keep it going. Here at LTC, communication is key.
And I hope that we should involve the City Hall too as well.
Yes.
Because,
yes. And hopefully City Hall will be watching this show and get some good ideas too.
Of course, because we talk very much about Lowell being a melting pot. but the leadership doesn't reflect that melting pot. They should be able to do that. That is one of the things where if the leadership reflects the melting pot, there will be education on both sides, and then you'll be able to manage and control the diversity within the Lowell at a much understandable level.
Yes, and I guess that comes down to people voting, because we have a democracy here, so we need to get out the vote and let people's voices be heard. That's, I think, the key. Well, thank you all so much for coming. This has been a wonderful evening, and thanks for joining us at home.